We're going to go through the different types of stuff we have for hemorrhage control here at Owasso Fire. So I've kind of got it laid out here. Well, starting here on the left with our dressings, we have a common 4x4 we use for small wounds, just a basic dressing. Next to it, we have the 5x9. This is going to be one size up. The main difference between these two is this is enclosed in a package here. You'll notice you have a blue line on one side, goes down the center. If I flip this over, there's no blue line. Okay, that blue line is the absorbent side, and that side goes down. Next, same, we have a large trauma dressing. You'll notice the same thing. Got a blue line on this side. This side does not have a blue line, but that is the side that goes down. So, exact same thing, different ways to apply different dressings that we can use, just different sizes. Next here we have combat gauze. So combat gauze comes as a package, looks like this. It can be black. They'll also be green. This is an expired package that we opened up for training here. This is a looser than it will come out, but it is Z-folded like this, but it's vacuum sealed inside of here. Once you open it, you can never get it back to that. But combat gauze is nothing more than a regular dressing, regular stretch bandage, just like this next to it, except it's impregnated with a hemostatic agent. You'll also notice it has a blue line. This blue line is so they can see it on x-ray when they try to get it out once you've packed a wound when that person goes to surgery, so it has that line for that. This does not matter which side goes down. So next to it, we get into bandaging. So these four here are what's referred to as stretch bandage, which is the name for them. This can be used as a bandage or a dressing, and they're definitely used for both at different times. So what their actual purpose is by the book is that this is used to secure the dressing in place. So we put a 5x9 on, or we put a large trauma dressing on, and then we use the stretch bandage to hold it in place. And then we can pull this and make pressure and wrap it around, and that's what holds our dressing in and becomes our bandage. But these can also be used as the dressing. If I roll these out, I can make any size dressing that I want. I can double this over itself however many times I need to make it as thick as I need it and make it into a dressing. So they're kind of multiple use. And we have multiple sizes on the truck. If you're like me, you probably only use this big one. I just use it and fold it however I need. But we have the different sizes that are out there. This one's going to be for something pretty small, like a finger. But you can use these as dressings. You can lay them directly on, or you can just wrap it, and it kind of works all together as one. So they're a pretty versatile tool. Next, we have our main two types of bandaging that we use. We have Coban, obviously, which is a sticky, stretchable bandage. It holds the dressings down. This works pretty good. You can apply a good amount of pressure with this. You have to be careful with Coban sometimes not to pull it too tight and apply too much pressure. But Coban's a very good tool. Sticks to a lot of stuff better than tape. And next to it is the Ace bandage, my personal favorite, which is an elastic stretch bandage which allows us to wrap and apply a good amount of pressure. And this doesn't have to stick to anything because it folds inside of itself. And so it doesn't matter how wet the person is. It's not using a glue adhesive to hold it down. Next we have our SAM splint. We're going to go over a little bit today. Kind of forgotten thing sometimes is if you have a large traumatic injury to say an arm or a leg, or any of these places where this can be used, and you have dressed and bandaged that wound up, we don't want that limb to be moving around. So it's a really good idea to always splint after you dress a wound, so no additional damage is done. You've stopped all the bleeding that's occurring, but if that bone is still moving around, you're going to do additional damage. Next, we have our cat tourniquet. These are the only type of tourniquets that we carry on the truck, is the cat. Okay, this is pretty universal. There are others out there. The soft T some others that are approved for use, but this is pretty much all you're going to see used out there. Everybody's pretty familiar with these by this point in time, but we all know exactly what all this is, what the loops are, what our windlass does. We're going to go over when to use these and some practical application here in a minute. And then I got a head immobilizer out here. If you ever want a good way to train, this is a good way to have people practice bandaging. So this is just one of the head blocks, and then it's got a wound down inside of it that I've made so we can practice how to bandage and how to wound pack. So we're going to work with all this stuff. This is everything we pretty much have on the truck that's out there for us to use. We're going to go through how to do basic direct pressure dressing, how to use the quick clot for wound packing, and how to secure dressings with bandaging to make it a proper pressure dressing, how to splint, and how to apply a tourniquet. All right, so we're going to go over direct pressure first. So we already talked about our different kinds of bandages that we use. We have a 4x4, 5x9, a large trauma dressing. So I'm using the head block, which has a pretty decent sized hole in it right here. So obviously you're going to pick what type of dressing that you want to use based on the wound. Really it doesn't matter, right? I can use a lot of these. This would be pretty small. A wound that I could put my finger in all the way to the knuckle is probably going to take much more than a 4x4. So obviously I'm going to pick one of the bigger ones. Something to remember is that I can use 10 of these, or I can use one big one. And you look at this, you're like, man, there's no way that's going on there. Obviously I can fold this to whatever size I want it to be, and then now I don't need as many of those. Okay? So direct pressure, obviously we're always going to put pressure straight on the wound. Remember, in order for direct pressure to work, you have to hold pressure for 10 minutes, okay, when using regular dressings. So that's obviously not practical for me to just hold pressure on top of this person's leg for 10 minutes. So we're going to make a bandage to hold it in place. So I pick whatever dressing, I would keep pressure on top of this. That is where my different types of bandaging that we went over come into play. So we're going to use stretch bandage for the first one. Stretch bandage is great because it, as I said before, it is a bandage and a dressing all in one. So I put my dressing on the wound, and then I can just wrap the person's extremity, and the stretch bandage rolls directly off because it is made to do this. This is what its actual purpose is by the book. So I can wrap this up. If I need more pressure, I can stop at any time and I can pull this as tight as I want it. Okay? I can also know a little trick. I can get right here and I can make an X right over top of the hole, and then when I pull, the pressure will be right there directly on top of the wound. Once I get to where I have enough bandage, or I run out, I then can take that piece and tuck that down in, and it will hold itself in place. It doesn't require tape, which makes it a very good type of bandage. So that is using a regular trauma dressing with a stretch bandage. All right, so same thing, using different types of bandages that are out there to hold it. We already used the stretch bandage to do it. That's a good one. A lot of people prefer Coban. I personally prefer Ace bandage, and we'll talk about both. So we're going to use, I'm going to use the 5x9 this time, just for practicality. The 5x9 goes over. Remember on the 5x9, the blue line goes down. That's the absorbent side. So it goes down to cover it up, and now I need to bandage it to hold it in place because it's not practical for me to hold this for 10 minutes straight. So a lot of guys really like to use Coban. I'm not as much of a fan of Coban, but it does work. So I've got to get this open. This is why I don't like it. I got to try to get this open. It works just like the stretch bandage. Right, and I just wrap it, and I can produce a lot of pressure with the Coban, so I have to be careful not to make too much. I get to the end, I tear my Coban and it sticks to itself pretty well, and it doesn't require tape. So Coban is a very good bandage if you can get it apart, which is normally a good idea if you ever have used Coban, to make sure that you leave a tail so the next person can get it off. Next is the Ace bandage, which I personally prefer. I prefer this because it also doesn't It also doesn't require tape to hold it in place, but it is it's much more elastic than Coben is. Coben, if you pulled this much, would rip, and stretch bandage. While it will stretch, it doesn't stretch that far. So I like Ace bandage the most of all. Ace bandage, same way, and I unroll it backwards, and I can produce pressure. For sure, Ace bandage produces the most because I can get so much stretch to it, and I can make this as tight as I need it to be to go around. I just wrap around this dressing on the wound until I've either have enough or I've ran out. Now, Ace bandage comes with a little Velcro strap at the end. Okay, if you did everything perfect, this will come out facing the right direction. If you messed it up, no big deal, I just turn it to X. But I can come and I can Velcro that to itself. If it doesn't Velcro, it doesn't have this, no big deal. I do the same way that I do on stretch bandage, and I find an edge, and I shove the edge up underneath, and I'll hold it in place too. But Ace is kind of unique because it has the little Velcro that is made to hold that, so it holds it there. My preference is Ace bandage for sure, but the others, Coben and stretch bandage, work well as well. All right, guys, today we're going to talk about wound packing, kind of our next step on our list for hemorrhage control. Wound packing generally is done. First, it's done when you have a large cavity for a wound. Okay, so this, I can stick my entire finger. I can only stick 2 fingers up to the knuckle inside of there. So if we had a wound like this, we either have a lot of vessels that are lacerated, that are going to be bleeding, or we have an artery next to the bone. So if we imagine this is the thigh, I could have the femoral artery next to the femur that's been lacerated. So we're going to have to get dressing down in there to apply pressure. That just a pressure dressing on the surface is not going to get pressure that deep. So that's when we're going to wound pack. We're going to wound pack. We're going to try to use combat gauze as much as we can. Combat gauze comes in a black or green package. It's going to be vacuum sealed. When you open it up, try not to let it fall out, and you can feed it straight out of the packaging. But a lot of times it'll rip just like this one did in the middle, and it'll come out. It'll be Z-folded and it'll be sealed tighter than this. This one's been opened before. And then we can feed this straight out of the stack into the wound. We can also use regular stretch bandage to do the same thing. They actually studied this and they found that they work about the same. And it's not that combat gauze doesn't work, it's that we don't do a good job of packing the wound, and then we don't do a good job of applying a pressure bandage afterwards. We're going to talk about both ways. So when I notice I have this wound and it needs to be packed, the first thing I need to do is try to stop the pressure, or stop the bleeding with direct pressure. So I'm going to have to get my finger inside the wound. And it's not simple enough as me simply just shoving my finger down in there. I need to look, just imagine that you had a water hose. Your heart is up here, it's what's pumping the blood, this is your water source. If that hose is spraying all over the place, you would step on the hose and kink it before the end where it was cut off at. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my finger, feel for that artery, feel for where the pressure is shooting the blood out, where the pulse is at, and then I'm going to push that against the femur, against the bone, to make it stop. Then I would get my combat gauze. So I'm going to start with the end with my index finger on my other hand, and I'm going to push that down until I'm on top of the source, and then I remove my other finger. I go get that, and I'm just going to repeat that process back and forth, feeding fingertip to fingertip down into the wound. And you sit there, and my combat gauze will unfold in the Z-fold, and once I get quite a bit in here, I'm going to run out of room for both fingers, and I can move to where I'm just using one finger and I'm shoving this down. Use the other to hold the pressure and this to feed, and just feed this to myself. And I need to feed as much as I can possibly put in here. When you think you have enough, push, 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 and get as much as you can and fill that entire cavity up. Once it's not possible to put any more in, I take the remaining combat gauze and I place it on top of the wound and I hold pressure on it. In order for the hemostatic agent to kick in, I need 3 to 5 minutes of pressure to to be held on top of this. But that's not practical in the back of the truck for me to just sit here and hold this wound. So I need to apply a pressure bandage. So I prefer, as I've said before, I prefer ACE bandage. So I'm going to use the ACE bandage. I'm going to come on top while holding pressure in place and start wrapping. Okay. I like the ACE bandage so much because just after 1 or 2 rolls, I can pull it tight and I can put a lot of pressure on top of this wound. Okay. Something else to remember, if I get to say to this point, I'm trying to put my pressure bandage on and I notice that the wound is bleeding through. I need more dressing on top of here. I can stop at any time and I can apply another pressure bandage, put pressure on top, and then just go right back to wrapping. I can really stack this endlessly on top of here. Once I get to where I am out of ACE bandage or I have enough pressure, I just simply find the edge and tuck this under and I hold my pressure in place. Now, because I have put the pressure bandage on top of here to hold this in place, this holds pressure for me and I don't have to hold this myself, but I still get the 3 to 5 minutes of pressure that will get the hemostatic agent working. And I have filled that entire wound cavity with quick clot, and so I'll be able to get good results on stopping that. So now that we have packed this wound, this is a good time to talk about splinting. Okay, so any wound like this that was a deep cavity that went down by the bone, say we're saying this is the thigh, most likely there's going to be a fracture associated with that. It's going to be either a gunshot wound or it's going to be some type of penetrating object during a car wreck or something like that. So there's a good chance that we have a fracture. So I just filled that entire wound cavity up. I just got good quick clot down there to everything and stopped everything. I want to make sure this is held in place so that that bone or those fragments of bone or fragments of the bullet or a piece of the object is not moving around causing additional wounds and defeating everything that I just did. So the sand splint is great for that. I can move the sand splint in under this wound. I can fold this up to be the same curvature as the wound. This could continue down the leg, obviously. And now I have the sand splint in place. Now how to attach it. I can use anything. I'm out of ACE bandage because I used it. So say I can use Coban or stretch bandage. And I go right back and just repeat exactly what I did to hold my splint in place. And I move up and down the leg and I splint this entire area. So, all right, so we're gonna finish the video off talking about tourniquets. This is a cat tourniquet. This is the only kind that we have. There are other types of tourniquets out there. This is the only one that we carry at Owasso. If you do run into another type of tourniquet for whatever reason, it's not supposed to be there. So you will always use a cat tourniquet. Nomenclature for the tourniquet, this is called the band, the self-adhering band, because it has Velcro all around it. So if people will call this the strap sometimes, and this is not the strap, this is the band itself. This white strap, this is the strap. This job is to hold the windlass into place. Okay, so this is your strap. This is the clip, and then this is the windlet, or excuse me, the windlass. Okay, so one thing is that when these come in a package, they come all secured nice in here. So when you open this, make sure that you're prepared for that. Don't expect it to be ready to go. It's going to come in the package all wound up and all completely tight. So the first thing you have to do is get this thing apart, get your strap undone. I like to use this small amount of this to keep this out of the way and get your windlass loose. You'll have to do that when you open the tourniquet. So to apply the tourniquet, the saying is high or die. They want you to get as high as you can on the extremity. So we're going to assume that, say Cody shot in the bicep. I need to get at least a hand width apart above that. That was the old way, but that was confusing people. So they just said go high every time. But there are limitations to high or die. If I go to put this on Cody, obviously if I pull this as high as I possibly can, I'm on his shoulder. That's not going to work. So I need to be as high on the extremity as reasonably possible. but not into the junction of where he meets his torso. I'm gonna go high. There's several ways to put this on. You saw me just loop it over. That is the not preferred way. This is the way I like to do it personally. But they say this is the not preferred way because you can't always do this. So they want people to learn to take this tourniquet apart and then be able to put it back together. When you do, if you are going to take the tourniquet apart like this, make sure that you protect your Velcro. If you stick this over Cody's arm or leg and then drag this Velcro through blood and mud on the ground somewhere, and this gets completely saturated, it doesn't stick very well, which is why I prefer to loop it over. You can do it either way. There is no right or wrong. Once you get it connected, you always want to be able to pull away from the person. So if you're going to put this on, your loop is going, or excuse me, your buckle is going to be on the outside. So I can come under his arm and put this together, right? So I just did this backwards. If I put this like this and I start pulling towards Cody, I'm coming towards his torso, and it's hard to get this tight because I start running into Cody, okay? So anytime that I put my tourniquet on, I want to be able to pull away from Cody. So the windlass portion and the clip will be close to Cody's body. I can pull it towards him, and then I'm pulling this back away from him. So it lets me pull this really tight. I'm not going to pull this very tight because obviously Cody's not really bleeding. And I hear the band to itself. I don't need to go into the clip. This can just hang just like this out of the way. Okay. Then I'm going to turn the windlass. So I'm just going to turn this. Usually it takes about 3 turns. You're going to turn this until the bleeding on the wound stops. Once it is tight and secure, the windlass goes inside the clip, and I use the strap to secure the windlass into place. You don't need to ride the time on here. The strap's whole job is to keep the windlass from coming out. Okay? Same thing with the strap. Try to protect it. Don't get it covered in blood. While we have this on, one of the problems people will run into when trying to apply this is they'll try to put the strap inside the clip. Some people teach this way. This is not wrong, but if I come inside the clip, this does keep it really secure. I have to make sure and get this out of the way so my windlass can turn and then can get inside of here. This makes it a little more difficult to put it in. This right here would be a perfect application for that way, and it's nice and secure. I just need to be careful that I'm not wadding this up and getting this all tangled. You'll run into this when you're doing this in a hurry. So that's one way with taking the tourniquet apart. Me personally, as I said, I like to leave these together. They come together. I like to just leave them together and then loop over the bottom of the arm and bring this up. To me, this is faster, and I don't have to worry about not being able to get this strap back in the buckle. Okay. Same thing, we're applying this and pulling away from him always so it doesn't pull the windlass into him. I want to be able to pull this so the windlass ends up on top. If you have the windlass down into their armpit or close to the torso, you're going to have to adjust the tourniquet so you can turn the windlass. You put this on in a hurry, you end up with the windlass on the bottom side, and now I can't get it turned and I can't get it tight. So I always want to try to keep my windlass on the top where I can see it or on the outside. Same on there. If I start here, when I pull it, it's going to rotate towards the tricep. So that's how you apply this. Obviously, we use the tourniquet when we have some type of bleeding. It doesn't matter whether it's venous or arterial. We have a bleed that's not being controlled by direct pressure. We're going to use the tourniquet. The same things we went over earlier with direct pressure and splinting. If I use a tourniquet and I have a very bad wound on Cody's arm, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't still dress and bandage that wound. The tourniquet goes on, it stops the bleeding, and then I want to apply dressing and bandages to the wound still. I want to try to save every red blood cell I can, and I do that with the application of the tourniquet, but I still put a dressing and a bandage on after that. It is usually a good idea as well to splint the wound that you put the tourniquet on. If Cody was shot through the elbow or the bicep or the forearm, anywhere on his arm, there's not a whole lot of room. Cody doesn't work out enough, so he's got a fairly small bicep. there's not a lot of room in here where that bone is not at. So most likely it hit the bone and there's a fracture. So if I put the tourniquet, I need to splint that so I don't do further damage.